When I told my kids I was skipping meals to save money, they rolled their eyes and said, "You exaggerate everything." But they didn't know my late brother left me $6.1 million that week, so I decided to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. My name is Caroline Mitchell, and I'm speaking to you from my living room in Portland, Oregon, where the biggest mistake I ever made turned into the greatest gift of my life. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. Now, let me take you back to that cold February evening when everything changed. I was 68 years old, working part-time at a library to supplement my modest pension. My husband passed away 4 years earlier, leaving me with a paid-off house but little savings. I'd raised 3 children, Robert, 42, Jessica, 39, and Michael, 36, and I thought I'd done a decent job. They all had successful careers, beautiful homes, and families of their own. What they didn't have was time for their mother. The evening it started, I'd invited all 3 for Sunday dinner. I'd prepared my famous pot roast, the one they'd devoured as children, begging for seconds. But that night, phones stayed glued to hands. Robert answered work emails between bites. Jessica texted her friends about some charity gala. Michael scrolled through social media, barely acknowledging the food on his plate. "Mom, this roast is kind of dry," Jessica said without looking up. I felt the words like a slap. I'd spent my grocery budget for the week on that meal. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm trying to cut costs where I can." Robert snorted. "Here we go again with the poverty act." "It's not an act," I said quietly. "Money is tight." Michael finally looked up from his phone. "Mom, you always say that. You have your pension. You have this house. You're fine." "I'm skipping meals," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed wasn't contemplative. It was dismissive. "Oh, Mother," Jessica sighed dramatically. "You exaggerate everything. Remember when you said you couldn't afford new curtains, and then we found out you just spent $300 at the garden center? Those were perennials that will last years." "The point is," Robert interrupted, standing up and grabbing his coat, "you cry wolf constantly. We're tired of it. If you're really struggling, maybe stop spending money on unnecessary things." They left within minutes, barely kissing my cheek goodbye. I stood at the sink, washing dishes, tears mixing with soap bubbles. The pot roast sat largely uneaten on the table. I'd be eating leftovers for days, not that they cared. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 3 in the morning, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the envelope I'd received 4 days earlier. The law firm's letterhead gleamed in the moonlight. Inside was a letter that had changed everything. My brother Thomas, who'd passed away 3 weeks prior, had left me his entire estate, $6,100,000. Thomas and I hadn't been close in recent years. He'd moved to Alaska for work 30 years ago, but we'd exchanged Christmas cards and occasional phone calls. I'd had no idea he'd been so successful. The money was already in my account. I'd cried when I first read the letter. Thomas had written a note attached to his will that said simply, "Carrie, you were the only one who remembered my birthday every year. You were the only one who asked how I was doing, not what I could do for you. Live well, little sister." My first instinct had been to tell my children, to share this blessing, to help them with their mortgages, their children's college funds, their dreams. But that Sunday dinner had shown me something painful and true. My children saw me as an obligation, not a person, a burden, not their mother. So I made a decision that would either restore our relationship or end it forever. I would pretend to be poorer than ever before. I would become the struggling mother they accused me of pretending to be. And I would watch, carefully, closely, to see if any of them actually cared, if any of them loved me enough to help when they thought I truly had nothing. The next morning, I called Robert first. He answered with his professional voice, the one that meant he was busy. "Mom, I'm heading into a meeting." "I need to ask you something," I said, letting my voice shake slightly. "Could you possibly lend me $500, just until my pension check comes through? I miscalculated my budget this month, and I'm short on my medication costs." The pause felt eternal. Mom, we just talked about this. You need to budget better. I can't keep enabling your poor financial choices. I'm not asking you to enable anything. I'm asking my son for help with medication. Look, I'll send you a link to a budgeting app. It's really helpful. I have to go. The line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling something crack inside my chest. This was my son, who I'd sat up with through countless nightmares, who I'd worked double shifts to afford baseball camp for, who I'd given everything to. I tried Jessica next. Her response was worse. Mother, I love you, but you need to take some personal responsibility. Maybe get a financial advisor. I can recommend mine, but she's quite expensive. Have you thought about selling the house? It's too big for you anyway. Sell the house your father and I built together? Mom, don't be so emotional about everything. It's just a house. A smaller apartment would be better for you at your age anyway. Less maintenance. When I called Michael, he didn't even answer. He texted back, "At the gym. What's up?" When I explained about the medication money, he responded, "Sorry, Mom, tight month for us. New car payments." I'd seen his Instagram that morning. He'd posted photos from an expensive steakhouse the night before. I set my phone down and made myself tea with shaking hands. Then I opened my laptop and began planning. If my children wouldn't help their struggling mother, perhaps they'd show their true colors when they thought she had absolutely nothing left. I called Mrs. Henderson, my neighbor and closest friend, and told her everything. Mrs. Henderson listened without interrupting, her weathered hands wrapped around her coffee cup. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Caroline," she finally said, "are you sure about this? Testing your children this way. What if they fail?" "Then I'll know the truth," I said simply. "Right now, I'm living in hope that they care. I'd rather live in knowledge, even if it hurts." She nodded slowly. "What do you need from me? Be my witness. And if I waver, remind me why I'm doing this." Over the next week, I set my plan in motion. I started with small things. I stopped my weekly hair salon visits, letting my roots show gray. I began wearing my oldest clothes, fraying at the edges. I returned the few nice items I'd recently purchased. A new winter coat I'd bought on sale, some comfortable shoes that hadn't hurt my arthritic feet. I kept working at the library, but I added extra shifts. When Jessica stopped by unexpectedly one afternoon and saw me there, I told her I'd taken on more hours to make ends meet. "Good for you, Mom," she said, barely looking up from her phone. "Staying active is important at your age." She didn't ask if I was tired, didn't notice the deep circles under my eyes from staying up late, wrestling with what I was doing. I started making comments in passing about how I'd switched to generic medications, about shopping at discount grocers, about keeping my thermostat low to save on heating bills. Each statement was true. I was doing these things despite the millions sitting in my account, but I delivered them with a weariness that wasn't entirely fake, because the truth was, even with money in the bank, I felt poorer than I ever had. Poverty isn't just about bank accounts. It's about being poor in love, poor in consideration, poor in the care of those who should treasure you most. Robert invited me to his daughter's birthday party. I went, bringing a homemade cake instead of the expensive bakery one I'd planned. My granddaughter Emma, turning 12, took one look at my crooked frosting and wrinkled her nose. "Grandma, why didn't you just buy one from Sweet Cakes Bakery like everyone else?" Before I could answer, Robert laughed. "Emma, Grandma's on a tight budget. We should be grateful she made the effort." The condescension in his voice stung worse than Emma's honest disappointment. I was grateful when nobody wanted seconds. I took the remaining cake home and ate a slice that night, tasting only bitterness. Jessica called 2 weeks into my experiment. My heart leaped. Maybe she'd noticed, maybe she cared. "Mom, I need a favor. Can you babysit next Saturday?" "Our regular sitter canceled and we have tickets to the theater." "Of course," I said. "Would you be able to pay me? I've been doing some babysitting for extra money." Her laugh cut me off. "Pay you? Mom, they're your grandchildren. Family doesn't charge family." "But family also doesn't let family skip meals," I thought. "Of course not," I said aloud. "What time should I be there?" Saturday came with a spring rain that made my joints ache. I took the bus to Jessica's house in the suburbs. I'd been taking the bus everywhere, selling the story that my car had broken down and repairs were too expensive. It was a 40-minute ride each way. Jessica answered the door in a designer dress I recognized from her Instagram posts. $2,000, the caption had said, on sale. "You look lovely," I said honestly. "Thanks, Mom. Kids are upstairs. There's pizza money on the counter. Should be enough for one large. They've already had snacks, so make sure they don't eat too much. We'll be back by 11. She was gone before I could mention I'd have to catch the last bus at 10:30 or wait until morning. I climbed the stairs slowly, my knees protesting. My grandchildren, Sophia, 8, and Lucas, 5, were absorbed in their tablets, sprawled across a playroom that held more toys than I'd owned in my entire childhood. "Grandma," Lucas finally noticed me, running over for a hug. This, at least, was pure. They loved me still, these little ones. They hadn't learned yet to measure affection by bank balances. We played games, we built block towers, we ordered pizza, and I used my own money because the $20 Jessica left wouldn't cover it. When bedtime came, I read them stories until my voice grew hoarse. At 10:15, I called Jessica. No answer. I tried the theater. They'd left already. I called again at 10:30, 10:45. 11 came and went. I tucked myself onto their couch, my back screaming in protest. At 1:30 in the morning, I heard the garage door. They stumbled in, laughing, smelling of wine and expensive perfume. "Oh, Mom!" Jessica stopped short. "You're still here." The last bus left at 10:30. I tried to call. Our phones were off during the show, and then we met some friends for drinks. She didn't sound apologetic. "You should have just taken an Uber home." "Jessica, I can't afford." "God, Mom, we would have reimbursed you." She sighed, annoyed now, tired and wanting me gone. "David, can you drive her home?" Her husband, swaying slightly, shook his head. "I've had too much to drink, not safe." "I'll call you a cab," Jessica said, pulling out her phone. I rode home in silence, the meter ticking away money Jessica had promised to repay, but never would. When I checked my phone the next morning, there was no message from her, no apology, no thank you, nothing. Mrs. Henderson found me crying in my garden that afternoon. "Maybe it's enough," she said gently. "Maybe you've learned what you needed to know." "Not yet," I said, wiping my eyes. "I need to go deeper. I need to know if there's anything, any circumstance that would make them see me, really see me." "Caroline, be careful. Sometimes when you look into the darkness, you find more than you wanted to see." She was right, of course. But I was already too far in to stop. The test was about to enter its cruelest phase. I want to pause here and ask you something. If you're finding this story compelling, if it's touching something in your heart, please subscribe to this channel. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me keep sharing these true stories. Thank you. Now, where was I? Yes, the cruelest phase. I didn't plan what happened next. Sometimes life writes its own tests. It was a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks into my experiment. I was shelving books in the library's history section when the room started spinning. The ladder I was standing on tilted, or maybe I tilted. I couldn't tell. I remember Mrs. Patterson, the head librarian, screaming. I remember the floor rushing up to meet me. I woke up in the emergency room with a concussion and a badly sprained wrist. The doctor, a kind woman about Jessica's age, explained I'd been dehydrated and my blood sugar had dropped dangerously low. "Mrs. Mitchell, when was the last time you ate a full meal?" I couldn't remember. In my zeal to sell the story of struggling financially, I'd actually been skipping meals, method acting taken too far. "We need to keep you overnight for observation," she said gently. "Is there someone we can call?" I gave them Robert's number, then Jessica's, then Michael's. Robert's secretary answered. "Mr. Mitchell is in a conference call. Can I take a message?" "This is Providence Hospital. His mother has been admitted. I'll have him call back when he's free." Jessica's phone went to voicemail. So did Michael's. I lay in that hospital bed, wrist throbbing, head aching, and waited. An hour passed. 2. The nurse brought me dinner, soup and crackers, and I ate it slowly, each spoonful tasting like failure. At 7 p.m., my phone finally rang. Michael. Mom, what's going on? The hospital called? I fell at work, concussion and a sprained wrist. They're keeping me overnight. Oh man, that's rough. Listen, I'm actually at a work dinner right now. Is it serious? Like, do you need me to come? I looked at the IV in my arm, the monitor tracking my heartbeat, the lonely room with its institutional walls. No, I heard myself say. I'm fine. Don't worry about it. Okay, cool. Feel better, Mom. I'll try to stop by tomorrow if I can. He didn't. Jessica texted around 9. Just saw the message. You okay? I can come tomorrow after my Pilates class if you need anything. From Robert, nothing at all. Mrs. Henderson came instead. She sat by my bed, holding my good hand, and didn't say, I told you so, even though she had every right to. What kind of mother raised children who can't be bothered to visit her in the hospital? I whispered. A mother who gave them everything, she said, so they never learned what it means to have nothing, so they never learned gratitude. The nurse who discharged me the next morning asked if someone was picking me up. My neighbor, I said. She glanced at my chart, seeing my 3 emergency contacts. I see. Well, you take care of yourself, Mrs. Mitchell, and maybe eat more regularly, yes? I spent the next week recovering at home, my wrist in a brace, my head still swimming occasionally. Jessica stopped by once, bringing flowers and staying for exactly 15 minutes before rushing off to a lunch appointment. Michael sent a bye, get well soon e-card. Robert called 3 days later between meetings, asking if I was all better now. None of them asked how I'd get by with one functioning hand. None of them offered to bring groceries or help around the house. Mrs. Henderson did all of that, bless her heart. It was during that week of forced rest that I made my final decision. I would stage one last test, the ultimate test, and after that, regardless of the outcome, I would reveal the truth. I called each of them, asking them to come for Sunday dinner. Family meeting, I said. Important news. They arrived separately, phones in hand as always. I'd made a simple pasta, all I could manage with one hand, and they ate without compliment or comment. So what's this about, Mom? Robert checked his watch. I have an early morning tomorrow. I took a deep breath. I need to talk to you about my financial situation. Jessica's eyes rolled skyward. Michael shifted uncomfortably. The fall at work, I continued, means I can't work for at least 6 weeks, maybe longer. And I've realized I can't keep up with the house anymore. The property taxes are increasing, maintenance is expensive, and on my pension alone... I let the sentence hang there. What are you saying? Jessica asked. I'm saying I might need to sell the house, your childhood home, and even then, I'm not sure where I'll go or how I'll manage. The silence that followed wasn't concerned. It was calculating. Well, Robert said slowly, you're right that this house is too much for you. I've been saying that for years. Sell it. Downsize to a senior apartment. Problem solved. Some of those senior communities are really nice, Mom, Jessica added. Very social. You'd probably be happier. But I don't have enough for a down payment on a decent place, I said, my voice breaking, not entirely an act now. I was hoping... I raised 3 successful children. I thought maybe you could help me. A loan, even. I'd pay you back. Mom, Michael interrupted, we all have our own mortgages, our own families. We can't be responsible for your retirement planning. I'm not asking for retirement planning. I'm asking for help. I'm asking my children to help their mother who has nowhere to go. Robert stood up. This is emotional. Blackmail, Mom. You made your choices. You didn't save enough. That's not our fault. I spent everything on you. The words burst out before I could stop them. Your educations, your weddings, your first cars, your down payments. That was your choice, Jessica said coldly. We didn't ask you to do any of that. And now you want us to feel guilty, to take care of you because you made poor financial decisions? I'm your mother. And we're grateful, Robert said, though his tone suggested otherwise. But we're not your retirement plan. They left together, a united front against their unreasonable mother. I heard them talking in the driveway, their voices carrying through the spring evening. "She's getting worse with this manipulation," Jessica said. "I know. My therapist says we need to set boundaries," Robert replied. "Maybe we should stage an intervention," Michael suggested. "Get her to see a financial counselor or something." I stood at the window, watching them drive away in their expensive cars, going back to their comfortable homes, and I felt something inside me crystallize into perfect cold clarity. Mrs. Henderson had been right. I'd looked into the darkness, and I'd found exactly what I feared. My children didn't just fail to love me enough. They resented me. Resented my needs, my age, my existence as anything more than a convenient grandmother who appeared when summoned and disappeared when dismissed. I walked to my desk and pulled out the papers from Thomas's attorney, $6,100,000. Money I hadn't earned, hadn't asked for, didn't need, not for survival anyway. But money that could have changed everything had I married people who loved me instead of people who loved what I could do for them. No, that wasn't fair. I'd birthed them, raised them, loved them. But somewhere along the way, I'd given them everything they wanted and nothing they needed. I'd smoothed every path, fought every battle, fixed every problem. I'd made their lives so easy that they'd never learned empathy, never developed the muscle of gratitude, never understood that love means showing up. The next morning, I called Thomas's attorney. "Mr. Peterson, I need your help with something unusual." I explained what I wanted to do. There was a long pause. "Mrs. Mitchell, are you certain about this? It's quite dramatic." "I'm certain." "Very well. I'll draw up the papers. But I have to ask, what if they pass this test? What if they surprise you?" "Then I'll be the happiest woman in Oregon," I said. "But I don't think they will." The papers arrived 3 days later. Mr. Peterson had outdone himself. They looked official, legal, devastating. A notice from the county about property seizure due to unpaid taxes. A letter from my pension fund about a clerical error that would reduce my payments by 60%. A past due notice from my mortgage company, despite the house being paid off, threatening foreclosure. All fake. All perfectly crafted to look real. I spread them across my kitchen table and took a photo. Then I sent a group text to my children. "Need to see you all immediately. Emergency. Please come tonight if possible." Robert responded first. "What kind of emergency?" I sent the photo. For 3 hours, nothing. I imagined them conferring, discussing, deciding how to handle their difficult mother's latest crisis. Finally, Jessica replied, "Mom, we'll come by this weekend. Try not to panic. These things can usually be worked out." This weekend, 4 days away. Their mother losing her home, and they'd pencil her in for the weekend. Michael added, "Have you called the county? Sometimes these notices are mistakes." Robert's response was the final knife. "Mom, I really think you need to consult with a professional about your finances. This has gotten out of hand." I didn't wait for the weekend. The next morning, I called them each individually. "I need you to come today, all of you, 5 o'clock. This cannot wait." Something in my voice must have broken through because they came. They arrived within minutes of each other, faces tight with annoyance, masquerading as concern. They sat in the living room, the room where I'd nursed them through fevers, where we'd opened Christmas presents, where their father had read them bedtime stories. The room now felt like a courtroom. "Mom, we're all here," Robert said. "What's so urgent?" I looked at each of them. My children. The babies I'd held, the toddlers I'd chased, the teenagers I'd worried over, the adults I'd hoped they'd become. "I'm going to tell you a story," I said, "and I need you to listen without interrupting." I told them everything. About Thomas's death, about the inheritance, about the letter he'd left, about the $6.1 million sitting in my bank account for the past 2 months. The color drained from their faces. "I told you I was skipping meals," I continued, my voice steady now. "You said I exaggerated. I asked for $500 for medication. You said I needed to budget better. I fell and ended up in the hospital. You couldn't be bothered to visit. I told you I might lose my home. You told me it was my fault for poor financial planning. Mom, Jessica started. I'm not finished. The steel in my voice surprised even me. For 2 months, I've watched and waited. I've tested you, yes, but I've also given you countless opportunities to simply be kind, to be present, to love your mother without expecting anything in return. This is insane, Robert said, standing. You lied to us. You manipulated us. I showed you exactly who you are. My voice cracked. Do you know what hurts most? Not that you wouldn't give me money. I didn't need your money. It's that you wouldn't give me time, wouldn't give me concern. Your mother was struggling and you were annoyed by it. Michael's face had gone red. So what? You're rich now and you're punishing us for not helping you, when we thought you were poor. No, I said quietly. I'm wealthy now and I'm showing you what you lost when you stopped seeing me as a person, when I became just an obligation on your calendar. Jessica was crying now. Mom, if you'd known I had money, you would have cared. Do you hear yourself? The silence was deafening. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm going to use this inheritance the way Thomas wanted me to use it, to live well. I'm going to travel. I'm going to make memories. I'm going to donate to causes I believe in, and I'm going to think very carefully about what I leave behind when I die. You're cutting us out, Robert said flatly. I'm giving you a chance, I corrected. A chance to decide what kind of people you want to be, what kind of children you want to be, not for money, for love. They left in shock, and I let them go. Mrs. Henderson came over an hour later, finding me staring out the window at the garden Thomas and I had planted together 40 years ago. How do you feel? She asked. Lighter, I said, and heartbroken, both at once. The next few days were quiet. No calls, no texts. I wondered if I'd lost them completely and I had to sit with the very real possibility that money mattered more to them than I did. On the 4th day, Michael showed up at my door, alone. Can I come in? We sat at the kitchen table. He looked terrible, exhausted, eyes red-rimmed. I haven't slept, he admitted. I keep thinking about what you said, about the hospital. I was at a work dinner, Mom. But the truth is, I could have left. I could have come. I didn't think it was that important. Why wasn't it important? Because you're always okay. You've always been okay. You're Mom. You're the strong one. I'm 68 years old, Michael. I'm not always going to be okay. He nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. I know that now, and I'm terrified that I learned it this way, that it took you testing us to show me I'd stopped being your son and started being, I don't know, someone who takes you for granted. What changed? I asked. Between when you were a boy who hugged me goodnight and now? Life got busy, and you never complained, not really. You were always there when we needed you, so I guess I thought you'd always be there. I never thought about what you needed. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was a start. I can't promise to be perfect, he said, but I want to try. Not because of the money. I don't care about the money. I care that I almost lost my mom because I was too selfish to see her. Jessica came the next day. Her apology was harder, more defensive, but it came. She talked about her own fears of aging, of becoming invisible the way she'd made me invisible. She talked about her marriage, struggling in ways she'd never told me. She talked about being so focused on appearing perfect that she'd forgotten how to be real. Robert took longer. 2 weeks passed before he showed up, and when he did, he brought his daughter, Emma. Emma has something to say to you, he said. My granddaughter looked at me with tears in her eyes. Dad told me what happened, how we all treated you. I'm sorry I was mean about the cake, Grandma. It was the best cake at my party because you made it. Robert's apology was stiff, uncomfortable. He'd spent his whole life being right, and admitting he was wrong didn't come easily, but he tried. He told me about the pressure he felt, the expectations, the way he'd learned to measure everything in dollars and outcomes rather than relationships and presence. I'm my father's son, he said. Dad always said men provide. I thought that meant money. I forgot it also means showing up. 3 months have passed since that confrontation. The relationship with my children isn't perfect. It may never be perfect, but it's real now. Michael calls twice a week just to talk. Jessica and I have coffee every Sunday, phones put away. Robert is trying, in his awkward way, to be more present. They don't know the details of my will yet. That's a conversation for another day. But I've made my decisions, and they're fair. Not equal, perhaps, but fair. I've learned that fairness isn't about splitting everything evenly. It's about recognizing effort, growth, and genuine love. I did take that trip I mentioned. To Alaska to see where Thomas built his life. I stood at his grave and told him about his niece and nephews, about the gift he'd given me that was so much more than money. He'd given me truth. The inheritance changed my life, but not in the way you might think. The money itself? It's wonderful to have security, to not worry, to be able to help causes I believe in and spoil my grandchildren the way grandmothers should. But the real gift was clarity. I'd spent years making excuses for my children's behavior. They're busy. They have their own lives. I'm being too sensitive. The money forced me to see what was real and what was wishful thinking. Mrs. Henderson asked me last week if I regretted the test. No, I said without hesitation. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing it. Some of you watching this might think I was cruel. Maybe I was. But I've learned that sometimes love means holding up a mirror, even when the reflection is ugly, especially when the reflection is ugly. My children are working to change that reflection. Some days are better than others, but they're trying, and that's what matters. As for me, I'm living the life Thomas wanted for me. I've donated to the library where I worked, funding a program for seniors who want to learn technology. I've set up college funds for my grandchildren with one condition. They have to write me letters about what they're learning, not for money, but for connection. I'm planning a trip to Italy next spring. Mrs. Henderson is coming with me, and every Sunday my children come for dinner. Sometimes the conversation flows easily. Sometimes it's awkward, but they come. They put their phones away. They help with dishes. They ask about my week and actually listen to the answers. Last Sunday, Jessica brought dessert, a bakery cake, expensive and beautiful. Then she paused and said, "Actually, Mom, could we make one together instead, like we used to?" We made a lopsided chocolate cake with crooked frosting, and it was the most delicious thing I'd tasted in years. That's my story. The inheritance that taught me what I was worth, not in dollars, but in dignity. The money that bought me truth, even when the truth hurt. I hope it makes you think about the people in your life, about whether you're showing up, about whether you're seeing them or just going through the motions. Thank you for watching, and remember, call your mother while you still can.